welcome back to the Washington Outsider Report on the Coalition Radio. For those newly joining the program, my name is Irina Zuckerman, and I'm the editor-in-chief of the Washington Outsider. Today, we have a special guest, Nurul Rakhimbekov, who is based in the U.S. And who is part of a coalition that is behind a major report focusing on Russia's evasion of sanctions in the past year and how it uses Central Asian countries, Caucasus, and China to prevent the international sanctions from being effective. He represents here the Center for Global Civic and Political Strategies and Civil Society with a coalition called Dongelek Istal. And his other members of the coalition Chairman Ore from Turkmenistan, Sirik Medetbekov, who is based in Germany, and Miras Nurmurkhanbetov from Kazakhstan. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important and poorly understood conversation. Unfortunately, thanks to political, the way politics affect the media, a lot of the discussion about sanctions are not about how, but about whether. The discussion has become diluted and simplified in a very binary format. Are sanctions effective or not? Are they necessary or not? Of course, as a typical lawyer, my answer would always be, it depends. But that is not the answer that most people want to hear. In fact, most people want to hear that the sanctions are useless, that they're failing, and that there's nothing anyone can do about enforcing them. I strongly disagree. I think a lot depends on what types of sanctions are being implemented, how they're being enforced, how this foreign policy measure, not a punishment, but a foreign policy instrument of political pressure can be used to achieve specific results, and whether gaps in enforcement are being observed and filled in. And right now, the gaps in enforcement we're looking at is the participation of these other countries in helping Russia get away with sanctions evasion. It doesn't achieve that success entirely on its own. It has partners, and what can be done about it is something we will discuss at a later point. But first, let's talk about your coalition and your own professional background. How did you come to get involved in this type of work, and what exactly you're doing?
Thank you, Irina. Thank you for inviting. It's a pleasure to speak and actually to contribute to the pool of knowledge that is already out there. We're not the only ones probably working on sanctions, but still, we had our own perspective. But back to a little bit about myself. You gave an already pretty good introduction of who I am right now. Yes, I do represent a Washington-based nonprofit, and we work on research. In addition to sanctions, we work on areas like security, regional security, which is also a growing concern. Both for United States in regional security and Central Asia, as example. Another issue which is we are involved with is promoting democracy initiatives. And we see one of the important areas, for example, is to engage people in building country democratic institutions. In my background, I did that work since late 90s. I was involved with building one of the important and the most important, I would say, democratic institution as elections in the country. Imagine after the Soviet Union collapsed, all the countries went on their own, and they started implementing new legislations, new constitutions, new laws. And the one of importance, the election law is one of the important parts and one of the important bricks in building the sustainability pyramid of any state. And it's important how it's approached, because elections are always, I will not go deep into the philosophy of elections, but it's one of the things that contributes to building democratic states. And that's one of the things I've been promoting, I've been working on for years with organizations like National Democratic Institute, International Republican Institute. They have also big offices with the big structures. They work in several countries around the world. I was working in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine on building election sustainability. We established partnership with the local domestic organizations running observation missions. And then also we worked on projects like teaching political parties how to actually implement political campaigns, election-related campaigns, how to build political parties. So these were the major focuses of my work. It was more direct one-to-one consultation as well as training. But later, I went more into research, researching subjects in various areas. I mean, it came from sort of writing articles, journalistic articles, and I was addressing always like key, very important topics. And it's like for the past 5 years, I write few articles. I wrote a few articles, and I write on the topic of geopolitics. And you know, when the war happened, actually all the attention was changed to the issues related to Ukraine. And I really share the position of supporting Ukraine as independent state with initiatives of people with a desire to proceed on their own without the control from Russia. And one of the areas that keeps them really struggling is the sanctions evasion that Russia is doing right now. Sanctions are, we know that sanctions are imposed by Western coalition, which is joined by other countries as well, like Japan. But it still remains quite a large share of countries that did not join the sanctions coalition and actually support Russia directly or indirectly or in a covered way. But we know that countries like China, North Korea, former states of the Soviet Union, which are closely related with Russia, they do all play part in this coalition. So it's important from one perspective that it keeps Russia fighting in the war. If they get supply, if they continue to get supply of the raw materials from which they build their military equipment, tanks, bombs, missiles, bullets, they will still be able to supply. They're already struggling with the manpower for the war, but they find different strategies, recruiting more and more people, hiring either from former Soviet states or basically there are labor migrants in Russia. We know that they don't have much rights, so they recruit them for the war. One of the ways that keeps them going and attacking Ukraine is that they're able to evade sanctions and build more weapons. So our idea and the task that when we started doing this research is to show to the world how Russia is evading sanctions and basically what backdoors they use so that people would know and address those areas directly. We're talking about law enforcement agencies, both in US and Europe. I've been in touch with many of them. Yeah, I would not have to name those, but we'll know who players are. We're trying to bring to light the reality, the real picture of what's going on out there in the field. And that's how we came across the idea of bringing this issue up. And we do conduct research, we publish widely, we distribute reports. It is the second report that I was able to share with you. First one covered actually 2022 and was published in beginning of 2023, maybe around January. And so it's like, I mean, published early in the year, the year following the year that it's covered. So we're talking about this report covering 2023, and actually, since it did not come early, like in January, it came in March. I was able to include some parts of the 2024 already because the situation is dynamic. Every day something new happens. As we speak, either Russia is finding new ways of evading sanctions, or something is imposed, or more regulations are coming out by the Western coalition. So basically, one of the recent positive, I would say, things that came out, and we've been also pushing for this for quite a long time, is that they will prosecute, sanction those who help Russia evade sanctions. They will prosecute. It will be not anymore administrative; it will be criminal charges, and criminal charges are leading to actually closing people in prison for up to 10 years. So it's becoming more serious, more than just penalty. So people should think twice whether to help Russia evade sanctions or not. And from the pattern of behavior, can confirm that gradually countries start understanding that being with the bad boy, it's not a really good idea. It can easily spoil your future, and they should really evaluate their international stand. What's important for them? One time, please Russia, or long term, be able to play as a player in the international arena. So that's a little bit sort of a general introduction of how we came across this idea of researching sanctions. And this is the second year. We will continue this every year. At the end of this year, at the beginning of the next year, we will be publishing another report which will cover this particular 2024. Well, that's a little bit about it. And what was the other question that you asked in the relations to?
Well, just wanted to see what in terms of observing these trends and these and this
Okay.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
To summarize, and maybe going more explanatory and completely into the parts of the report and the logic of the report, is that we try to use all the channels for the information, for the researching information that we need to come out with a conclusion. We did a social survey on social networks, using social platforms. We did interviews at the local level. We monitored state resources. We really write applications to the statistic agencies, for example, of those countries that we monitor. It's not guaranteed that we always receive a reply, but Kazakhstan replied, and I attached some of the official responses from Kazakhstan as an example of how we get information. And it doesn't mean that information is always complete. Frankly speaking, I would say it's rather more confusing, and done so on purpose, because Kazakhstan as a state confirmed that it will not help Russia to evade sanctions. But at the same time, current president of Kazakhstan also made it clear that he will not be able to investigate all individual cases. That means, basically green light to whoever wants to help Russia evade sanctions. You go ahead and go and do so. So it's something that we know that is happening, and we're trying to address it. We write to the government that it's not correct, and the more transparent you are, the better feedback and better cooperation you will receive from the people who want to help you. And to be honest, I think US is adopting a very good strategy right now. It's actually offer an alternative cooperation to those countries like Central Asia to actually, I mean, they pose the question, who you want to be with? Basically, we'll provide you aid. Everybody knows that, for example, that water supply is one big problem in Central Asia. When time comes for for the crops, when the season comes for the crops, there's a problem with irrigation in some parts of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and I think right now I can, from my memory, there is like several billions that Europe allocated for addressing those issues, region wide, not just for one country, region wide. So solutions are offered, and we're working to actually, use this as a motive to help countries or management of the countries understand that they need to cooperate. They need to work in the same line with where all civilized world is moving. So that's a little bit again from the structure of the report that we put together, the challenges that we had, and generally speaking, when we get to findings of our report, we were actually shocked, and we already shocked for the second year. As I said, we published last year a report, and it showed some very bad trends that imports are to Russia from the mentioned countries in the report, which is the countries in Caucasus, Armenia, Georgia, then Kazakhstan, all stand countries, 5 stand countries, is actually skyrocketing. Imagine if the supply of electronics was 51%, 51 million, let's say, like turnover with Russia. I mean, later figure shows that it grew to almost a billion, and it never was like that. And, we don't believe in any occurrences just like this. All of a sudden, exports to Russia would grow. Last year, we have not included China as part of sanction evasion scheme. This year, we understood that China is actually is one of the group of the countries that initiate the sanction evasion process. The Chinese companies place order in Europe for certain goods that are required by the Russian military machine, and it is not being supplied directly to like say China. It is supplied to a third country, to like Kazakhstan or Kyrgyzstan, and then from there only it goes to Russia. So that way they are trying to confuse the trade. So the people will not be able to trace where the goods are coming from and what's the final destination are. And obviously, the final destination is Russia. There are many things that we have not included in the report, but we came across, like even the transportation companies. The I don't know the English term for this, but when you actually you order goods in Europe, you bring them to through Russia to Kazakhstan. The truck leaves its cargo in Russia. So it's basically, they put another truck part on the truck, and truck continues to Kazakhstan, where on the way it basically dropped all the goods. And it's easy to do so because of the Eurasian Union. Many people don't have access to the information circulation and benefits within the Eurasian. That's why Russia created it as a zone, as a safe zone for itself. And what helps sanction evasion is that members of this Eurasian Union, like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, are not being sanctioned. And this is loopholes which Russia is using. They are working through these countries to get goods to the Eurasian Economic Zone, and there it just floats freely around. It's very hard to trace. It continues on everyday basis. And if you remember, I gave you example of cotton pulp that is used to produce gunpowder. It's happening nowadays. The contracts are signed till 2025. It's being brought from Uzbekistan, where cotton is one of the strategic resources of the country. From Uzbekistan, from the southern Kazakhstan, it makes all the way to Russia. And you can name, many cases like that. Why it's important for addressing sanctions? It's also another very important question. I wanted to mention this because it helps to actually, when you monitor sanctions, you influence closing of this channel. People can be creative only up to a certain level. If they exhaust all the options, like plan A, plan B, plan C, if it doesn't work, then they are cornered. They will not be able to find another solution to move their goods or industries. Eventually, it leads to stalling Russian economy. We already have signs that Russian economy is leaping because of like, for example, I can give you example of Avtovaz. It's a popular brand car brand in Russia, and they were forced to cut their labor force by 60% because they are not able. Again, they tried, of course, evading sanctions, but they are not able to get the spare parts which are manufactured outside of the country. That's what they're assembling cars. So they had to cut their labor force by 60%. They have to. The number of cars produced obviously reduced by 4 or 5 times. So they went to try to ship the cars to meet needs of the Russian market from through Georgia, from one of these schemes. Another important area that I would say why addressing sanctions is important. It helps to find and freeze Russian assets. You probably heard that there's like almost 280 billion worth assets frozen in the West that are considered now to be sent to Ukraine to conduct reparation. So when we actually look deeply into the sanctions, we see that they help to reveal, the sanction evasion. When you investigate, you reveal more channels of circulation of those resources. And obviously, each economy has limits. And at some point, countries give up to actually provide data on Russian resources. So it basically helps to freeze movement and circulation of Russian resources, and to reveal additional resources, and to be able to actually send those resources to the victory. Another big problem that I need to mention is actually continued cooperation with Western companies. Uh, Many of the you know rockets or missiles shot down in Ukraine reveal that those missiles are made from spare parts using American and German microchips. Again, that's a very unfortunate situation where the profit comes first above other values. So there are people, and there are cases who are being citizens of that particular country, running projects like that. And I have included a few cases in my report. These are the former citizens of Tajikistan, Belarus. There is a warlord which is based, which is working with Uzbek group, this Rakhimbekov network. They're providing like military equipment, including helicopters. So what I'm trying to say is that this cooperation is also helping Russia to evade. And we have not yet spoken about the main strategic resources, but while we're getting there, I just wanted to cover these areas. So yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that actually helps Russia to evade sanctions, is that West is not fully following sanctions themselves. So we're discovering those areas, and we're bringing it to the attention of the law enforcement agencies in the West, and including the United States. So I mean, I can talk endlessly about many things, but I would just want to give you a few concrete examples, and it's getting really to the level where it reaches like strategic areas. Recently, one of the important deals is it's done in uranium. In Kazakhstan, there are, if you know, Kazakhstan is about like third or fourth producer of uranium around the world, and Kazakh sold to Rosatom, like two very important and big uranium sites. That gave access, of course, you know what Russians would use uranium for, and that happened just recently. And right now, it doesn't mean that we are also sitting quiet about this. In addition to the report, our members of coalition in Europe brought it to attention of UK authorities, for example, because Russians used their subsidiary companies registered in UK. So our members of coalition literally filed applications to those groups, to the groups that are monitoring sanctions evasion and yeah, like monetary policy. What they did, they froze the process of liquidation. In order to close the deal, they had to basically liquidate those subsidiary companies. So right now it's frozen. The authorities in UK said, stop, we'll have to look at this before you run away, before you close the deal and run away. So things like this, it's something that that's important to actually civil society, to get involvement of civil society. And again, one of the biggest loopholes, I would say, is the oil supply, energy resources. Russia has been making a lot of money from energy resources historically. And we know that in, let's say, 2022, Russia spent about 300 million every day for the war, whereas they make 800 million from sale of energy resources every day as well. So it means sale of their energy resources is capable of covering every day of their war operation in Ukraine. Cotton supply, I told you already that it's one of the problems because cotton pulp is used for the gunpowder. It's one of the ingredients that is used, and it's still going on. It's happening right now as we speak. Back to the oil issue. Kazakhstan oil is transported through the Russian pipeline, which is called CPC, where Russia has the controlling package. And while supplying oil, Russia mixes oil with Kazakh oil. And it's all represented like oil from Kazakhstan, but at the same time, Russia is embargoed Russian oil is able to make it to the Western market. Do you understand how it works? I mean, they're mixing oil so that they're able to still send oil westward. They're hiding that it's Russian oil, but they're mixing it with the Kazakh. This is also happening with the sale of oil products. There was there's a ex-president's son-in-law, Timur Kulibayev. He owns several companies through which, and he was always like a king of oil industry since he became related to ex-president in Kazakhstan, and he was on the Gazprom board of directors. Right now, I believe he's being replaced by Schroeder, former Chancellor Schroeder. That's another strategic move. But basically, Kulibayev he runs the companies that sells oil, Kazakh oil around the world, to Europe, to West, to China, and he's the first person who lets, since he's on the board, whether officially now or unofficially, he lets circulation of mixing of Russian oil. It's even happening right now in large quantities. I'm just trying to underline that it's not like something that we make up. Here and there, information appears in media. Some of the information you can get from the statistics, which is difficult, but we still do simple math. We see how much let's say, Kazakhstan receive import. Kazakhstan is one example. Other countries too receive imports from Europe, and then we see how much exported to Russia. If not talking about internal statistical sources of data, there is UN Comtrade information that is available online. You can always pull out information from there. The only problem is that it's always sometime behind. If you want to get concrete information, you only can get it a year later. But anyway, in all occasions, we see that Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, those three countries have concretely doubled their both exports from European countries and exports to Russia. I mean, imports from European countries and exports to Russia. So you can do the simple math and see why has it not happened before? Why it is now that all of a sudden these figures shoot up so high? And I mean, it's in many industries, but the major ones that I want to outline is the semiconductors, microchips, and electronics. That are the things that Russia requires currently for building their military equipment. In addition to, of course, technology, where West is sanctioned, access of technology to Russia. Russia went to China and North Korea right now. So this is one of the areas that I underline, important strategic resources. While working with law enforcement agencies, we also bring to attention concrete companies that are dealing with sanction evasion process. I cannot say that we're very happy with the rate of response that we got so far, but still there are some cases where we can say that the Office for Foreign Assets Control, briefly OFAC, has actually sanctioned. It happened just last year, maybe towards the end of the year, when they sanctioned about 3 companies in Kazakhstan and more, 4 or 5 companies in Uzbekistan, the same number of companies in Kyrgyzstan. And again, those companies are all related to the technology, to electronics supply, to semiconductors and microchips. And but that doesn't take into account, for example, what I just told you, what is done with the supply of raw materials, like cotton pulp, one thing, rare earth metals. Russian companies relocate from Russia and re-establish their business in Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan is readily sell them industry. Like a case with Polymetal. It's a big company in Russia which deals with rare earth metals. They resigned from the board in Russia and opened their production in Kazakhstan with the same name, Polymetal Kazakhstan. Same people, same Russian people became board directors in Kazakhstan. So again, when they land in Kazakhstan, they're involved in production of the raw materials that is feeding a Russian military machine. So I mean, it's a huge bank of data information. We can go on and on. You know, that's about it. I mean, this is how the situation looks like, and I'm quite sure Russia is getting sophisticated with every day. You know, on evading sanctions, because we have the threats that they will have this spring subscription where they are going to, you know, triple the number of the military units they are going to send to Ukraine, as well as military equipment. And I mean, they're finding ways to be able to still, you know, issue those Kalashnikov tanks and whatnot. So yeah, that's in a nutshell how the situation looks like. So if you have questions, I'll be happy
to I've got a
help
lot.
you out. Yeah.
So
Sure.
the big political debate over sanctions right now is, okay, I mean, sanctions are not a punishment, they're a tool of foreign policy, but how can the international community, or especially the United States in particular, enforce global order? What entitles them to that right? And aren't they afraid about disrupting business, or, you know, essentially disrupting an economic order based on free trade and agreements and so on and so forth? If US and others start imposing these sanctions however they wish, or seizing assets and so on and so forth, isn't that dangerous for global economy? Doesn't that mean that it's a free for all and anybody can start freezing anybody's assets whenever they feel like it, without necessarily publicizing evidence, and can it not become excessively politicized? So how do we address this broad concern that's not always in good faith, to be honest? I think it's pretty obvious that Russia is a nefarious actor, and everything they're doing is aimed towards a clear violation of international laws. But nevertheless, it's still a question that is getting a lot of pushback, especially even as Russia is developing financial instruments to circumvent sanctions, and countries are willing to participate in it because they don't feel like following US direction on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's start from the end of the question. And of course, they are not following the direction, and they are trying to implement counter sanctions in Russia by banning certain products to be brought to the country. Whereas we see that it's not effective in any respect because people are still using iPhones, people are still drink Coca-Cola. We see these things happening, even though they may hate it, but they still use it. And this is real life example. It's happening. Western products are still flooding Russian market, and that's despite of the sanctions, Western sanctions, and the counter sanctions imposed by Russia. Now, getting into the whether it will change the order, economic or world order, I think if you put on the scale two important things of what order can be changed by Russia's victory, in Ukraine, and what order can be influenced by introducing sanctions. I think the damage is more done by the first one. So it's important that in addition to the sanction restriction should be introduced very thoughtfully. It should not limit key essential products or areas that would totally, deprive of certain human rights. Let's say same people in Russia or those who help them to evade sanctions. But at the same time, it should be done in a way that teaches people to change their pattern of behavior from aggressive to to maybe at this stage to actually negotiation, to be able to negotiate, to lead it to the peace agreement. That's the main idea behind these sanctions. It's not just to say you're bad guy forever. This is something to like in common to agree on way of behaving towards a person who creates trouble in order to help him understand where those problems are and how to better address them. So I think in this regard, nothing so crucial has happened yet to the world order or to economic order, with introduction of sanctions that's been made. Whereas it's been effective. I gave you already examples that there are industries in Russia that are not able to make it. So then, of course, they will influence the decision-making process of their own authority. I mean, they will stop blindly listening to the coercion of participating in the aggressive form, but rather they will be having more motives of pushing the authorities towards more negotiation with the West. That's my thinking. I mean, it's of course can be subjective at some point, but I would say that it's not done till the very end. The implication of sanctions are going in the direction of actually helping, those on whom they are addressed, helping those to understand that there is a better ways to achieve something that they're trying to achieve. Okay.
So meanwhile, you also, one of the things the report talks about is how there are two categories of sanction: one against individuals and one and one against companies and products. Which one, in your opinion, is more important and more impactful, and where do you see more success and why?
That's a very interesting question. That's a very interesting question because we know that historically in Russia there is a big bridge, strong bridge between authorities and oligarchs. those who are running businesses. That's those who are controlling industry. Same situation is also in the allied countries. Those countries who help Russia to evade sanctions, like countries in Central Asia. And basically, those oligarchs have connections. They studied sometime, in the past, in the same universities or schools in Russia. So it's easy for them to agree on things. They're like buddies. Let's do this. Let's do that. They find common terms. So I often call them like a presidential club, and I refer to oligarchs too. So I say that the which one is effective? The effectiveness comes actually when you are down to a concrete person. So if the more focused sanctions are, the better they are implied. Because if you say Kazakhstan is helping to evade sanctions, you're just saying the country and who is helping evade sanctions. Is it President Tokayev? Is it like Prime Minister Smailov? Who exactly? Or it's a plethora of the oligarchs. Same is related Russia as well. So I would say the more targeted sanctions are, the better they are, and that's proven by the practice already. There are like, I don't know, over 500 oligarchs already sanctioned in Russia. It means what? It means their name. They have to change their name, register stuff in their name of their I don't know, drivers of their somebody who works at their home, servant or whatever. I mean, you know what I mean. They'll have to move their assets in the names of different people. That also provides a certain risk to your assets. What if that person tomorrow decides to just disappear with your assets? So what I'm saying is, it's the targeted sanctions that I'm always thinking that are concrete. But when we talk about the sectoral sanctions, it's good for statistical purposes, and for statistical purposes, not only per industry, but actually to compare and to understand actually on the geopolitical map which industry is moving where. So I would say name targeted sanctions and attach to a certain industry. So that's how you have to view and understand and seek for effectiveness in imposing sanctions.
So interestingly enough, we've had probably hundreds, thousands of sanctions on individuals and entities and products, and it's hard to keep track of all of it, and it's hard to enforce all of it. How do you prioritize what sanctions and sectors to go after when there are so many key industries? Energy, aluminum, which has not been sanctioned by the United States, various sectors and products. How do you keep track? How do you choose? How do you figure out what is actually doable?
For us, it is important to actually look at things strategically. Strategically, meaning building up priorities to what is needed first. What's the demand for in Russia? That's how we build that's how we prioritize our approach. That's how we structure what we need to look after. And of course, number one in this category, in this list, is led by the military industry. Military industry is something that's mobilized right now, and all attention of Russian management is changed to this particular area. There you can have different parts in military industry, from drones, which are, by the way, also supplied from Kazakhstan. There are private companies in Kazakhstan, in the northern Kazakhstan. One of the cities known as Petropavlovsk is building together with China, a Chinese subsidiary in Netherlands. They build drones and send them to Russia. It's one of the areas where the drones are coming. So you see, I mean, they're trying to use also to way to evade sanctions and to be able to supply drones. It is part of the military industry. Drones are sent from Russia to Ukraine, and you know, this is something what they also drones are something what it's a technology that is used quite often right now by actually both from Ukrainian side and Russian side. So that's why we give it a very big priority. Same related to semiconductors and spare parts of Russian military equipment. Nowadays, as I already mentioned earlier, we don't have one particular piece of the military equipment assembled in one place. It's always it always has a spare parts elsewhere. Like for example, China supplies a lot of spare parts. As I mentioned again, and I will repeat it again, that there are Western spare parts, semiconductors in Russian military equipment, in tanks, in machine guns, missiles already mentioned. So the bottom line is I'm trying to make is that if we build our priority to what is needed to Russia, of course, will be first on the list of our attention. Then I would say raw materials come into picture. And raw materials, as you rightfully so mentioned, aluminum supply is not sanctioned. It's carried out right now. Rare earth metals are also not in the sanction list. And third would be like supply of energy resources. And it's very hard area because even Ukraine is still debating about, gas supply. Russia is supplying gas through Ukraine, to Ukraine also on the way. Even though they were talking about reversing gas, it took place, but then still contracts are still valid right now. And I think right now Ukraine is debating and already probably took a decision to not extend the contract on gas supply. So that's how we build our pyramid of priorities when we look at sanctions. First is the equipment for the military industry. Second is raw materials, and third is something that what cannot influence on it, like world needed product.
Now, one of the things that you also mentioned in your report is the tricky issue with the dual-use technologies, which on the one hand can be used towards military and war needs, and on the other hand, they could have innocuous everyday civilian purpose. So how would you ensure that the regulation of such complex matters, dual-use technologies, can be done in a way that best suits that narrowly tailored purpose that you said, and it's enforceable. And on the other hand, it's also much harder to track, especially when export-import controls are loose. And that's how American products end up in third parties, then we sell them to Russian.
All right. Good example for your question, and thank you for a very good question. And it's still challenge to us. I cannot answer it fully because we're still researching, and it's very difficult to track and to ensure that, for example, a electronic toy, will not end up in being a spare part in a missile tomorrow, because even European law enforcement agencies and like leaders in the European Union, they've made a statement recently that they've been finding missiles in Ukraine, which are made up of the washing machines bought in the West. Spare parts, taken from washing machines and assembled, in Russia. But the spare parts were clearly, definitely manufactured in the West. So that's how you get surprised about it, but when you start thinking of how to track it, well, one of the things I could suggest, and I heard already in the discussion, is actually, and right now it might be sounding a little bit crazy as an idea, but some of the things, some of the equipment is actually can be trackable. Like, I mean, you can have a GPS unit which can be read from the space by satellite, so you can actually track where it ends. You know, when you sell those spare parts, then it's trackable. You understand that it actually moves to Russia. It's not moving to Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan. It's ending up in Russia. So that's one of the technologies. That's one of the ways how you can trace, how you can track down, you know, where your products, as I say, dual use products or technologies are used. Okay?
Now, one thing that you said that was very interesting about China's role
Uh-huh.
as an intermediary, it's particularly interesting
Mm-hmm.
not only because China is such a big economic force, not only because the US and China have very significant financial relations which have not weakened in the last few years. On the contrary, China is exporting to the US more than ever, but also because Russia and China are competitors when it comes to Central Asia. And yet, China is willing to play this role in helping, circumvent Western sanctions and work as an intermediary along with the Central Asian countries. How does that benefit China's vision? Why is it willing to help Russia instead of taking advantage for its own influence? And just basically hijacking the formerly Soviet sphere of interest and completely eliminating Russia's role in it.
That's a very interesting question. It's not only relates honestly to sanctions. It's overall geopolitical claim and games between the superpowers. As you know, one can name this situation. And we have China, we have United States, we have Russia on the other side. And Chinese have been always playing very, let's say, multilateral policy. They don't want to be unfriendly with US. They claim that they don't follow, they don't help Russia evade sanctions, but at the same time, they do so. There are cases where our journalists in Kazakhstan, for example, they shoot a video. Right now, I'm not sure. I have a copy of it, but first of all, it was not downloadable, and they tried. The people who posted video, they didn't want to be public. So that video actually shows that there is a military equipment like tanks moving by trains through whole Kazakhstan towards China. I mean, it's heading from Chinese border towards Urals, and it goes to Russia. So that's how they supplying. They keep on supplying. But at the same time, if you think and you analyze Chinese rhetoric, you realize that they have claimed for Russian land. There's been several times where they referred, not officially, but they did refer to parts of Russia as being China. And I don't know if it is already further invention or just a grapevine that school children in China are taught on the map that these parts are parts of China, while pointing at Far East, Дальний Восток. So basically, that's that's how Chinese view it. They think that let's be friendly with everyone. We want Russian land, but we want also the Western technology. So that's and they slowly, continuously acquiring assets at the same time. For example, in Kazakhstan, you can divide Kazakhstan into part being sold to Russia and part being sold to Chinese. especially regarding the strategic resources like oil and gas. A lot of pipelines are, taking out these energy resources from Kazakhstan to China. So I would say they have this non-war technology or approach that they will be friends with both sides, but at the same time they will try to step over both.
So,
So that's how the reality is. Yes.
so another issue that I think you've raised that's very important and should not be overlooked is how Russia is trying to circumvent sanctions not only through effective bilateral relationships with individual countries and all sorts of internal schemes with companies that are financially looking for windfall and to try to take advantage because Russia is willing to pay premium prices on the one hand or to sell below market price, such as oil, on the other because of the caps on the international markets. But it's also using a very effective method of blocking international cooperation by forming relations with groups of countries, with unions. BRICS is one economic mechanism that Russia is using. The Eurasian Economic Union is another. It's also trying to resurrect other past economic and political alliances. So can you tell us a little bit more about what that looks like? I think people are fairly familiar with BRICS, but the Eurasian Economic Union is more of the radar, and also it's more cohesive internally because of the closer ongoing cooperation between the countries that are already there. So it's actually surprisingly more likely to be effective.
Well, Russia quite energetically tried to explore BRICS in 2022, the same year the war in Ukraine began. And I remember that was during the crisis with when they stole basically Ukrainian grain about the same time. So they've tried to exploit and they've run even a summit. I don't remember already which country it was in, but there was a BRICS summit at which actually Putin did not come. He made a speech from elsewhere. I understand that they lay a lot of hope for being a member and laying a lot of hope on the members of the BRIC. But perhaps they can only exploit certain extent of its cooperation, because we're not talking only about China. Brazil and South Africa, India. It's another big economy. Well, if you look down the road of what Russia tried to do, they tried to, after introducing all these oil caps, they tried to sell oil to India. They sold oil to India, but they got paid in rupees and tried to convert rupee to a ruble, and then you can imagine what you can get. So it is only this much how you can exploit, to, as I said, to a certain extent, you can exploit BRICS as a union. Whereas it's a totally different picture with Eurasian. It's true that it's being exploited a lot by Russia, but we have a situation with, for example, Armenia, which recently very much liked support of Russia in terms of Karabakh. You know what happened, of course. Azerbaijan was able to yeah. So I don't have to go into details into that, but Armenia didn't get the support of Russia, which we hoped for. And now we see what happened. Armenia now wants to to go away from the Eurasian Union. And yeah, I guess that's very interesting trend. After Armenia, I think Kazakhstan is the next to exit Eurasian Union, where Russia will probably be left with its always beloved brother Belarus. And again, people in Belarus, it's also not very happy. We're talking about the presidential relation between Lukashenko and Putin. Now, how it's being exploited, I have partially already mentioned the advantages, the legal structure, the legal infrastructure that is used by the country. Once the good is brought from outside, from the West, from other countries into the Eurasian Economic Zone, it has the right to be transported freely with less, with less controlled tariffs, with less imposed customs duties. Of course, there are some charges, but it's very, very, very small amount. So they are able to circulate stuff easily within the Eurasian Economic Union. Besides, it's like what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. They keep all secret together in Eurasian Union. It's lack of transparency. Some data even, I think, forged to the world. It's not actually factual data. It's giving to the way Russia wants to supply, and as long as the allies of Russia within the Eurasian Economic Union are happy with it, and they are. They seem they are. So Eurasian Union is, in terms of legal infrastructure, is ideally a sanction evasion process. In terms of exploiting loopholes, as I mentioned already, countries' loopholes, like for example, I can be a Russian citizen. I go to Kazakhstan, I register a company there, and then I move my production from under sanctioned jurisdiction to unsanctioned jurisdiction. That's what I called a loophole, a legal loophole, so that they can actually continue produce raw materials which is used for the Russian military war machine. That are the main things that gives them advantages, in addition to already natural resources which they generate within those republics for Russia. If Russia wants, it will be produced, it will be supplied, like cotton pulp, which I was talking about. So these are the three major things that they can implement or extract from Eurasian Economic Union.
One of the things that you mentioned, which brings me to a slightly controversial question, is, in addition to exploiting these relationships, it can do some of the things we've discussed, which is creating alternative financial mechanisms, shell companies, finding new markets for its own export. And here Russia has a bit of an advantage because a lot of the Central Asian countries are sort of limited on their own by their own energy access points. They have a relatively narrow opportunities to where they can export energy. They have a high degree of dependency on certain things. So what prevents Russia from squeezing them from the other side to ensure that they don't actually trade with pro-Western countries and do not cooperate with any sanctions and evade?
I'm sorry, 1 second. Just lost it. 1 second. I lost the connection and can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well, yes.
Something strange happened. Okay. Can you say that again, please?
Yes. So, Central Asian countries, they have, they're not as globalized as some of the other countries. They have somewhat limited options for energy exports. Their economies are not quite as, quite
Mhm.
as international. So Russia has actually, they have somewhat of a dependence in Russia, and Russia can squeeze them and not only use them for their own needs, but also actually create an obstacle for the West. They can, force them to choose between following the, Western opportunities. They can actually, in theory, just as the US and others have the option of imposing secondary sanctions on companies that are cooperating with Russian sanctions evasions, so Russia can do
Mhm.
the same thing. What's stopping them from doing that?
You mean like counter sanctions that
Yes.
I mentioned before?
Yes.
Well, we sort of started talking about counter sanctions. Uh, well, you're right. I there is certain number of countries which is still in the camp with Russia. We're talking about like if right now we have maybe 60% which joined the anti-war coalition. Let's call them anti-war coalition. It's like United States, UK, European Union countries. There's good 40% of other countries which still want to continue business with Russia, and they do continue running business with them. Uh, in terms of hello, can you hear me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. In terms of counter sanctions, I would say that Russian economy is not ready and not in the position to mirror international sanctions. You know, because it cannot be as equal as it is. Uh, I'm not a very good economist to give you like a perspective in terms of figures, but from the strategic point of view, I would say that there is this obviously uh, uh, influence or tools or international trade agreements that can be used, as a way of regulating uh, relations, economic relations, strategic relations, in which Russia has less say. Not only because sanctions are imposed by the West, because the way its economy was structured originally. I would say that we're talking mostly about the natural resources. The base of Russian resources and then the large chunk of Russian resources are coming from the natural resources: gas, oil, food, all that stuff. Less technological resources, and of course that creates a certain difference and certain influence. That's why you cannot really mirror sanctions that is imposed by the West to mirror it back in Russia. Of course, they can refuse from using, and they've been refusing from 2014 to accept consumer goods. They made it several times. They destroyed all
away goods from the importers and destroyed as a way
that we are not accepting Western qualities, Western product, Western values. But it's more to me was of ideological nature and less economical. It has less economical impact. And again, I mean, my major point here is you cannot really you're not in a position to mirror international sanctions. I mean, it's just impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Where you like basing mostly on the raw materials, you try to impose counter sanctions on somebody who is producing end product, technological product.
So here's another question. We just mentioned earlier Armenia, its intent to withdraw from this
Yeah.
from the Eurasian coalition. It's annoyed with Russia. It's looking to move towards the West. On a government level, it all seems to be very clear. On the internal level, let's be honest with ourselves. The Armenian economy is extremely dependent on Russia. So unless the European Union and the United States collectively decide to essentially adapt and restructure the entire economy, which I'm not entirely sure they are ready to do, how can Armenia avoid continuing to be the place where Russia launders its goods and money and just freely operates despite whatever the government is looking to do?
Yes, I mean it's quite clear that Armenia is quite dependent on Russian economy, Russian connections. The only strategy that can help Armenia to become more independent and take more assured steps it's actually by providing both technical and financial support. And it doesn't have to be like big lump sum of money, because we know, I mean, if we come now with Congress, in Congress with proposals of funding, like what's happening with funding of Ukraine right now, then that's going to be backfiring quite likely. I think it's like it has to be a gradual focus on the interest of Armenia on
providing both technical and financial support
in agricultural industry. That's where Armenia is best at. There is also in the West, there is a certain amount of Armenian lobby that can participate in those processes. Again, focus on most strategic resources of the country that is available. I don't know, tourism industry, banking sector. It doesn't necessarily have to. Country doesn't necessarily have to be, very rich to make bold step towards developing. People will not have negative effects immediately if you suggest concrete plan, development plan with gradual phased implementation of this industry development program. I think it's been done before, and that's a good question for economists. And I only view things from the political and strategical view. But even then, I can see that if the continued dependency on someone, it doesn't necessarily mean that that you're not able to think of plan B and start going into your own direction. I don't advocate for things to start from the scratch. I'm actually saying that it should be a very thoughtful and gradual strategy, focused on strategically important directions for the country. And I see agriculture and tourism as the banking sector as one of the important aspects that can be helped by the West.
So that brings me to the point, to the other part aspect of the discussion, which is what can be done quickly, what needs to have a more long-term effect, what role should the secondary sanctions play, and how do you balance between positive and negative incentives? Because sanctions, let's face it, are not the only tool in the Netherlands arsenal, you also have positive incentives such as investments, and basically various diplomatic channels and cooperation agreements and so forth. So what do you see as the ideal combination and ideal path forward towards countering Russia's influence and Russia's ability to evade sanctions?
Hmm. That's an interesting question. It's always like a question that will open room for creativity. I would say that yes. I mean, it's like there's always a traditional approach. You should do this. You should do that.
And usually it's around it's around things that are already implemented. And as you mentioned, rightfully,
that it doesn't have to be only when it comes to secondary sanctions. It doesn't have to be of punishing nature. You can give motives. There is dozens of ways. Like you can give some fee breaks on contracts with companies when you can do a due diligence before entering the contract. So I mean, I would say that it's not only restricting that you should not do this. You'll be penalized. You'll be put in prison. But it's like more of a legal approach. That we offer you to do it in a legally appropriate way. We offer you more benefits if to say directly, if you avoid to deal with Russia. But of course, there is a way of structuring this more, appropriate way. But what I'm saying is that in giving or easing legal relation, creating less bureaucracies is something what the companies always look for. So reducing this bureaucracy obstacle and motivation by fee breaks, maybe some tariffs, customs tariffs. And again, that's a question for economists. I have no idea what they could be. I only think and view at the strategic level. But at the strategic level, this is the area that I would go for first. That will be a carrot, as opposed to a stick. Stick would be imposing sanctions, punishing. I'm talking about secondary sanctions, imposing secondary sanctions, punishing, putting in prison, paying huge penalties. But at the same time, options should be kept open. And as I said already, that the motivational aspect should be in place. I think it's doable, and I think the foreign assistance that is done by United States through organizations like USAID, or European assistance that's done through the European Union project, European Union Council. Yeah, it's something that builds a path for.
Is it? Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So basically, as I said, that it's important to not only impose the strict measures, but also look into the areas where we can actually motivate people to change their behavior. And that's the carrot part of the approach. It hasn't been actually developing so far, and we have not suggested as a fact in this report, but we certainly will include it as a part of the next report, and all the communications that we have, over this period of time till the next report. We will recommend as one of the parts is to offer benefits and fee breaks for companies that can put on hold, I would say, cooperation with Russia. I mean,
not necessarily finishing it for good, but actually
I'm not a cat person.
stalling this cooperation until certain things will happen. I mean, those companies that help Russia to evade sanctions. I don't know how 100% positive outcome you can have from this, but at least it will contribute to the decision of those companies whether to cooperate or help Russia to evade sanctions. And then you could show the legal part of it. That here's what happens, and it's not like that we want to impose. It is something that it's already inbuilt into the international regulations, and that's why we advocate for working on sophisticating international trade regulations. That the way due diligence is done. Maybe the criteria for blacklisting the companies that cooperate help Russia to evade sanctions. Yeah, that's the set of things that I would suggest should be offered as a carrot to motivate companies, not to be part of the aggression. At some point, they should realize that they're helping aggressor to carry on whatever he's implementing right now against the world, not say only against Ukraine, against the world.
Finally, my last question is to the presentation of this information in such a way that presents a compelling argument why sanctions not only are important but are effective and are effective in this particular case. Because as we have seen, there's a lot of failures, there's been a lot of missteps, so a lot of people are suggesting throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So how do we systematize the tracking of sanctions that makes it easier, transparent for regular people to keep track of where the successes are visible, where there is challenges, why this is, a system that is that is flexible and fluid and changing, and where you can make changes and evolve your strategies. Because if you just go by the papers, they summarize their own perspectives and opinions, and it's hard to keep track of the data. It's impossible to keep track of all the lists. Yes, the Treasury publishes the list of sanctions entities, individuals. Nobody knows. Nobody usually keeps track of that, and they certainly don't say every time something is violated. There's, you just get general investigative articles. So what do you propose that can help win this argument that is probably also being used by pro-Russian groups as a way of basically discrediting the very concept of sanctions?
That's also a very interesting question, and I think it's one of sort of a key words is actually to talk about the effect of sanctions. And we came across of many conversations with those who impose restrictions, those who restrictions are applied on. A lot of conversation concerns doubts. On one side, we can hear that we are too sure that the sanctions are working. Some people would say that sanctions take effect over a certain period of time. They're applied now, but real effect of them will happen in the future. But then the question comes into mind: what's the use of applying sanctions if you have aggression right now? You want to change the pattern of the behavior now, and then the effect will only come later. When we talk about long-term effect, it's not only closing the current conflict. it's also providing a background to avoid any further aggressive actions. It's a contribution to the peaceful conduct of economics, international trade. I think there is more to the fact that the long term is only to stop the conflict. No, the long term effect is longer, is to prevent from other conflicts to happen. And I think that those who are implying sanctions, that side that applies sanctions, is also not doing enough monitoring of the sanctions outcome. I haven't seen that there's like an international tool for monitoring sanctions, which, to my opinion, should include contributions of civil society. It's we who live in those countries can ascertain, can feel what is happening around us, and we, as citizens, can be providers of first-hand information, because we see where goods are moving. We have access. We talk with neighbors. This word of mouth system is spreading around easily. So I'm saying that it's important to include civil society in the process of monitoring sanctions. If you try to get official information, you don't really get a clear picture, because Russia has closed its all official statistics. Kazakhstan, other countries around Russia have some unorganized statistics. UN has, UN publishes data like a year after the fact. That makes it difficult. So there is no this effective tool to monitor sanctions. When you monitor sanctions properly, you will be able to tell whether sanctions are effective or not 100%. Right now, we can only pinpoint at various failures of the Russian economy as the outcomes of sanctions. But it might not also necessarily happen because of sanctions. It might happen because of other reasons. So then we will have to analyze what exactly has contributed more to the failures, to the inflation, to the collapse of economy. If we will be able to take out those parts that we monitored, and we saw that we, for example, thrown a stone into water, and it's the stone thrown into water that created these circles, going around. Then we will be able to tell that, yeah, sanctions are working, and this is exactly what has caused it. That's what the realistic picture nowadays is, and I really find it hard that somebody in the societies, former Soviet Union, around the world, is actually combining all elements of the monitoring process. First of all, analyzing fully what's implemented by sanctions. Right now, if you even talk to the person who works in sanctions world, he can only speak to a certain extent in general, but there are millions, categories, subcategories of sanctions, and they are all components of one big picture. I think it's not yet systematized. It's important to have it systematized, and that you can plug in and get clear picture that this particular thing contributed to this failure, and that's why it's led to this effect so far. I would say right now we can only draw clear conclusions about the military industry. In some parts of the Russian economy from all these observations. But going concretely, again, it requires another level of effort to get the data. It's a struggle to systematize data. It's another struggle, and the third struggle is, of course, to prove that sanctions actually work on a certain negative outcome in strategy and economy. But the biggest, goal of sanctions is change of behavior, which we see still being aggressive from Russian side. So that's what the realistic picture is on at the moment. And again, we keep improving. We are not perfect. Also, as a civil society, we're working in the direction too.
Well, would you then recommend a formation of an international sanctions monitoring task force? Or would you say
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's a good solution of many issues. But that international sanctions task force, because again, I mean, you have Europe, you have United States. You can just there is ascertain that there is a certain coordination, but it's only I mean, if you look at 2022 and almost the whole of 2023, you'll see that the sanctions were not really going in line. Closer to the end of the 2023 and
Mhm.
this part of 2024, you see that they are harmonized
Mhm.
because you see that EU and US is applying the similar legislation so that it hits one particular point. That's why, yeah, it takes time to coordinate, but task force that actually, unites all the coalition countries, coordinates its efforts. It's going to be very, very useful too. But that task force should also include civil society. Again, people who are close to the countries, who are there, who are watching uh, progress of sanctions and generally trade, supply, everything. They should be specifically trained and sent into the field to control this thing.
Finally, I'm going to end with proposing something controversial, and I'm curious about your opinion before we conclude, which is
Mhm.
that, part of the reason sanctions may be failing in many respects is not because sanctions themselves are such imperfect instruments, but because the West has not been able to um, sell the message not only of the value of sanctions, but of the value of their own order and their own view of the international cooperation and international, law and what and their own vision, due to whether it's because they themselves are deeply polarized, whether because they do not have some common language with other countries around the world. For whatever reason, there is not a lot of buy-in into these sanctions. So the sanctions look in a lot of ways like Western sanctions rather than international or global sanctions. And even UN sanctions have their limits, and they're very hard to impose precisely because Russia and China are on the permanent members of the Security Council. So how do we overcome this problem, if you think it is a problem, of having in lacking a unified global visions of bad actors, and also skepticism in the in the Western view of the world and the way it should be.
That's also very interesting question, and of course, it's critical to the position of proving that the sanctions are working.
Mm-hmm.
And but at the same time, you always come to the point where you revise stuff you're implementing and seeing how far you can go, and revising whether you need to revise the strategy and approach. But at the same time, I think that it's important to have systematic approach and not only just recognize that there is a failure of sanctions and hence we should leave it level it is now and don't touch it. I think it's important to actually reinforce attention, not only apply the sanctions but also participate in the process of sanctions applications, or following the process of sanctions applications. I think many countries have that resources, to be honest, and I don't think nothing is done in this direction. I think there's certain progress in cooperation is done. It's noticeable, as I brought in the previous example of year by year change in monitoring approach to sanctions, which is happening, which is true. Now, what is controversial in that I don't think we can say that it's controversial. I would say it's logical. It's logical when you have not done something in previously, and you have to face it. There will be always a strategy where you have to revise what you have implemented because you have not taken into account certain things like loopholes, for example, the one that I was talking about. When sanctions were addressed, wouldn't we think that those countries which apply sanctions would have thought about the loopholes, and why didn't they suggest it immediately? No, I mean, again, it's something new. This is what world has faced after, let's say, maybe after the Hitler times, right? I mean, similar situation with the rigid pressure from Russia to change the world order. Well, it was before, but not in such an obvious manner. Hence, again, there is a margin of error that always will be in place, that we have to revise, come back to the strategy, add more points. And I don't say it's controversial. I mean, it's logical. What is happening, and I would say I see progress, but I think it should be enhanced. And again, there should be more cooperation between the countries within the coalition, more agreements. There are situations just because of the country's interest in diplomacy, which you cannot explain. Like, for example, recent visit of Prime Minister from Britain, and the way he was turned down by the U.S. Speaker to meet, or for no clear reason, because probably some political,
and by the national security advisor, that he was downgraded from a personal meeting to a Zoom call. So that also sent very strange vibes.
Yeah, that's that's what I'm saying. It's like a human factor, and it's understandable, and the only way I think to get better approach in sanction in controlling sanction evasion process is actually to start following and paying more attention without necessarily believe that the sanctions are effective. You don't need to be persuaded that sanctions are effective, and only then you have to participate in the process of monitoring and making them more effective. But you don't have to believe. You have to start doing it, and then slowly, gradually, as we see the progress will be only improving. And I think in future we will see that more and more Russia will after being cornered with sanctions, Russia will take wrong decisions, chaotic wrong decisions, which will lead to failure of economy even further. I foresee problems with energy sector as well. Big contribution to that is actually happening because of the Ukrainian heat of refineries, for example. Russians are thinking now about where to take their oil for processing. So yeah, that creates a new sorts of different level of decisions. So I think it's yeah, it's by doing it, by monitoring, by getting involved, you'll get involved more. You will be able to make sanctions more effective.
Thank you so much for this really great inside look into sanctions and how Russia has been trying to use Central Asian countries and Caucasus and China to evade sanctions and what we can do about it. I think that will be very informative for a lot of people and fill in a lot of gaps in areas that are quite important but are extremely overlooked, especially by the mainstream media. And thanks for everyone who've been watching. We'll be back next week.
Thank you very much.
At 9
Thank you
p.m.
very much. Thank you very much, Irina, for great questions. And yeah, that's an interesting topic. And yeah, it was pleasure for me to contribute from my side what we do. And,
Thank you so much, and
what can be done.
best of luck with your future reporting. And thanks to everyone who's watched us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.